This is a series of talks that you've had that are kind of meant to help develop you as educators. And I'm really thrilled to see that some people have turned up to this one because, as Jennifer and I were just saying, it's kind of a bit more nebulous in the scope of topics that you've had. And I think it's something that we all kind of do without really realising that we're doing it. And that makes it a little bit more or less tangible, I suppose. But I think it's just as important as some of the other modalities that you've been learning about. So, what I'm hoping that we'll get out of today is to understand what it is, because like I say, it's kind of a bit nebulous. Appreciate why it's important. We'll think about how to self-direct our own learning, and then how to guide our own learners in self-directing their learning. Because although they're two separate things, there's an awful lot of overlap between them. So, a lot of this is going to be super interactive, okay? So speak up for the mic. What is self-directed learning? Have you any concept? Like, does that already mean something to you?
Not a lot of nagging.
A lot of nagging, yeah.
Not a lot, but where the person who wants to learn is initiating it themselves and not being pushed.
Yeah.
So it's intrinsic.
Yeah, awesome. Oh my God, you've already talked about half my slides. That's beautiful, thank you. So what isn't self-directed learning?
Spoon feeding, lecturing.
Rote learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not sometimes, I think when people think about what self-directed learning is, it's like, well, you know, someone's given me a topic, like Jennifer asked me to speak about self-directed learning, and so I've gone off and researched self-directed learning and put together a presentation for you. It's not totally self-directed because someone else has given me that topic and told me to go and learn about it. It's not that I've sat down and go, what do I want to know more about, and go off and learn about it, okay? So sometimes it's what we think is self-directed learning isn't necessarily, and there's a little bit of overlap, all right? So, this is a very technical definition, and Nathan has rumbled me because we both went to the same course from the Stanford University group in the States and learned about the same thing. So a lot of what I've talked about is drawn from their expertise. So, a process in which learners really take the initiative. Like you said, this is an intrinsically kind of self-motivated thing, which a lot of our learning isn't, and we'll talk a little bit more later about what really does motivate us. It uses the support and collaboration of others, but it's not driven by others, it's driven by ourselves. In which learners diagnose their learning needs. That can be really hard. Knowing what you don't know is actually sometimes really difficult, and knowing what you need to learn more about can be very difficult to self-identify. And so we'll talk about some ways in which we can identify our own learning needs and how we can help our learners identify theirs. To formulate relevant learning goals, there's no point just kind of going at it. We need to know why we're doing it and what we want to achieve by doing it. Identify both human and material resources to help us in that process, and we'll talk about resources in a little bit. To choose and develop appropriate learning strategies, and to reflect on and evaluate their learning. So it's a process that very much has like a beginning, a middle, and an end. You really have to like set it up, do it, and then evaluate whether or not it was ever even worth it. So why do you guys think it might be important?
Self-perpetuating. So
Yeah.
if you can establish good self-directed learning processes, that's going to keep people, for want of a better word, the lifelong learning idea.
Yeah.
It means when they are faced with something, they know the process, they know how to self-manage that rather than having to look for the expert in every situation.
Yeah, true. So it's like a lifelong kind of learning behaviour that can be adapted to lots of different scenarios. Yeah, I get that. Is it any better than more traditional forms of learning? Is it any worse than more traditional forms of learning?
I think education is very resource intensive and it's expensive.
Yeah.
Particularly within the health service. So I think resource-wise, it can be a bit less resource intensive as someone that facilitates education, because that the direction and sourcing resources and evaluating their own learning is put back on them. Like, we're here to support, but the responsibility and the motivation comes from them. So I find it's important for me in that I'm one person with a lot of staff, so I would like to facilitate it more.
Yeah.
Just for, as a service in cardiology, to support education and learning.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like, there's only so much that you as one person can do to educate a large group of people. And so if they can take some responsibility and some self-direction for their own learning, that frees up some of your resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Do you?
Sorry, when you're saying is it better or worse, so I guess
Yeah.
it does depend on that, really on the evaluation of it and where that comes from, because self-directed learning doesn't mean quality learning either. Like, depending on what resources, what they draw upon, how they interpret it, without that feedback, it doesn't mean they're necessarily learning the right things. The right way.
Garbage in, garbage
Yeah.
out. Yeah, and so that's very true. And so it's like, I suppose it's self-directed, but it's not standalone or isolated learning necessarily. And you know, as we referred to in the previous slide, it really is a process that has to have an end, whereby evaluation really does have to occur in order to make it worthwhile. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Do you think it's more enjoyable? Is it more realistic? Is it better tolerated, as it were, than very prescriptive didactic learning?
I think it'd be more enjoyable because if they're given the choice of what to study, they can choose something they're interested in.
Yeah. If you have a really motivated person, right, if you give them the opportunity to choose what it is that they want to learn more about, that can be really motivating and they can really run with that.
It's much easier to do lots and lots of reading on something you're interested in rather than
Absolutely.
something that's
Like-
just really you find boring.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think that says something about you and I as learners. You have to be pretty motivated for that, because there is certainly a group who just want to turn up and sit at the back of the lecture room and they don't want to get involved and they just want to be talked at. So it's very dependent on your learner, and therefore you really have to be good at identifying the learner who's going to benefit from this, because not all of them will. If you're not really motivated and really ready for it, this can just flop.
The content, I guess, more likely to get higher engagement, regardless of learning for one of it. But the process by which they learn isn't necessarily going to be more enjoyable, because you are sort of limited to some extent with self-directed learning as opposed to group, as opposed to application or whatever. So you might have someone who's motivated about a particular topic, but the process might not be as enjoyable as something that we could facilitate as educators, even though it might be more resource intensive, but we might have we may be able to provide something that is more enjoyable. Or
Do you think there's a way that we could amalgamate self-directed learning into group learning?
yeah, absolutely. Pre-work, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Understanding what it is, and then yes. I guess it does transition though, because if we're, other than the individual approaching us with what they would like to learn, if we're prescribing we're going to be doing this in a month's time, go do it that as you see fit. It's sort of moving.
It crosses over, doesn't it? And there will be a lot of crossover, and I think that that's acceptable. And if we're too kind of rigid with the definition of what is and isn't self-directed, I think it gets a bit lost. But you know, if you have a group of learners and you do give them some flexibility to choose what it is that they want to learn, and yes, maybe you do give them a deadline, and they go off and they research them, they come back to it themselves, and then teach each other, and you've turned learners into educators as well, and that in itself can be quite motivating. So it might be a way to kind of incorporate it too. And this is where I wanted to play my little exercise, which is completely non-medical. And I was anticipating up to 20, and we have 7, because I'm including you. You get to play. Do you want to play?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, so that means we have 8. So everyone take 2 or 3. These are completely non-medical questions. I hope you all have like a phone or a Googling device. I just want you to look up the answer. I'll give you like 5 minutes.
True.
Yeah, to look up the answer to your question. And we'll share.
Oh, 2.
Perfect. 2 or 3. Let it all come in. Beautiful. You're in time to play our game. We're talking about self-directed learning, and I'm giving everyone a little exercise. And so I've got questions. They're not medical at all, but I just want you to Google the answers to the questions. Maybe someone.
Can I borrow someone's phone?
I can blend
Yeah,
them
I'll give you
on.
that one.
I'm sorry. I got out in the corridor and realised.
And everyone's going to take 2 or 3 each.
Oh, I think
So I'll give you a few moments. Yeah, of course.
Sorry, I think I got 2.
Yeah, please, because there's fewer people here than I anticipated, so I can.
So is this, so when you say, is this for this year, the Oscars?
If it's meant to be for this year, it will tell you.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, it's ever.
I'm just trying to find the answer to the question.
Yeah, just look up the answer to the questions that you have. And if you have 2, do 2 questions.
200 megabytes months, you know. What can you do for 200 megabytes months?
Sure.
I should have pre-warned you that like I was learning material.
I thought, no, I don't want it to go off. Thank you.
Has anyone ever known both their questions? No?
Not that I know of. Some of them I've made particularly like you have to look them up.
My Google is not working.
If anyone's really struggling, I do have answers. I can share my answers with you.
Can I just ask the questions on questions? That's a plural question with the S here. I found one. Do you only want one?
You can download.
Yeah.
My Google's not working. Sorry.
Maybe everyone's there. We'll start on this end. Can you read me your question and your answers?
Nathan, you know this one. What is Bob Dylan's real name?
Sorry.
It's not his real name.
I didn't know it was just his real name.
Robert Allen Zimmerman. And what was Sherlock Holmes's address?
211?
Close.
Baker Street.
221B Baker Street.
Thank you.
Okay, I apologise. What is the name of phobia defined as the fear of Friday the 13th? Paraskeivia decatriphobia.
It's said just like that.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing that he says
Yeah.
like it's a technical term?
Google said. Who is the actor, male, who has won the most Oscars? How many has he won and how many nominations has he had?
Very old.
Jack Nicholson. Is that right?
Yep.
He's been nominated 11 times and won twice.
I've
And
got that he's been nominated 12 times and won 3.
Oh, I'll give you my answers.
There you
So
go,
use the
let's see.
specific. I have 12 and 3. 12 nominations and 3 wins for Jack.
who is the actress with the most Oscar nominations? How many nominations has she had and how many has she won? I have Catherine Hepburn.
I've got Meryl Streep.
Yeah, but Catherine Hepburn.
21 nominations and 3 wins for Meryl.
Got 4.
I've got 10 nominations and 4 wins.
Yeah, but the question, who's won the most Oscars? You're right, 4 and 12 for Catherine. She's won the most, she's won 4,
Yeah.
and she's been nominated 12 times. That's what I have.
I've got a question. What was Marilyn Monroe's real name? And it's Norma Jean.
Yeah, Norma Jean Baker, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't managed to find the answer for the second
No
question.
problem.
What is the only country in the world to be named after a woman?
That's a great question.
Estonia.
Um,
Estonia, no.
San Lucia.
Huh?
Ah,
San Lucia.
San
in
Lucia.
the Caribbean.
Oh.
Yeah.
Lucia.
Yeah.
Lucia.
oh, Lucia.
Lucia. What is the Hungarian word for pepper? Boars. B-O-R-S.
Okay, I got the free.
How many of Snow White's 7 dwarfs have names ending in Y and name them? So there's 5.
Yeah.
So there's, well, I'll name all of them. Doc, Grumpy, Dopey, Happy, Sleepy, Sneezy and Bashful.
What was the most Oscar-nominated movie of 2018, and for how many Oscars was it nominated? And how many did it win?
Dunkirk.
That was second. The Shape of Water had 13 nominations with 4 wins.
So I have two.
Last year.
The name of the phobia described as a fear of being tickled by feathers. Pteronophobia.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
With a PT.
So the
Yeah.
actress one, so Catherine Hepburn. World's biggest island. Greenland.
We're a continent.
How tall is the world's tallest man according to Guinness Book of Records? What's his name? It was Robert Wadlow, and I forgot to write there. 8 feet 2 inches tall.
My first question was how many squares are there on a chessboard? There's 2 answers in essence to this question, because in essence we look at a chessboard and we've got black and white squares, so people think it's 8 by 8, which is 64. However, you've also got the outside square, you've got the inside squares, and if you add all of those up, you've got 204. The other question that I had was what sentence, and it actually says what sentences uses every letter in the English language. I was told I only needed 1, but that's quite right, yep. So it's the quick brown fox jumps over a lazy dog, but I did find another one. Pack my box with 5 dozen liquor jugs.
Kids can't use that.
So we've already had the male actor nominations. What movie won the most Oscars? How many did it win? And for how many was it nominated? So there are 3 movies that have won equal number of Oscars. We've got Ben-Hur, Titanic and Lord of the Rings. Ben-Hur has won 11, Titanic has won 11 and Lord of the Rings 11. Ben-Hur was nominated for 15, Titanic for 17 and Lord of the Rings for 17. There you go. On what day of the week is a person statistically most likely to have a heart attack?
Monday.
Yeah. And how much more likely is it to happen on that day?
Not much more. Is that a percentage or?
Yeah.
It's quite 25 or something, I thought.
20.
Is it? I'm not sure.
That's right.
Yeah, Patrick as well.
Oh, yes.
I think it's mine.
And in the early hours apparently.
Okay, so I got what is the tallest building in the world according to the Guinness Book of Records, and where is it and how tall is it?
Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, so it's the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. So that's United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
Cool.
And how tall is it?
830 meters.
Yeah, 828.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for directing some learning. All right. So, what motivates us to learn? Why do we bother?
We're curious.
Yeah?
Personal gain,
Yeah, like what?
financial
Okay.
growth, things like
Yeah.
showing off.
Yeah. Ego.
Information also underpins everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, means to end.
Knowledge is power.
Gets you that job or degree or whatever.
Yeah.
It could just be a requirement that you know that you have to meet.
Yeah, so like you might have an exam or a deadline, something really tangible. Or it might just be that it's fun, that it's interesting, that you have a genuine interest in a topic, that you're curious about a topic. Your own kind of perceived knowledge gaps, like ego. And that might be derived from a previous experience that you've had. Might be a positive experience where you're like, oh, that's interesting. Might be a negative experience where someone's like, I can't believe you don't know that. What the hell's wrong with you? And you're like, I'm never going to let that happen again. I'm going to know everything there is to know about X, Y, Z. Doubt, conflict. If you have a disagreement with someone over something, it's pretty powerfully motivating, right? Like, I'll look that up and I'll be fucking right about it too. Groups, study groups, you know, kind of that sensation of being compared to your peers. We're sensitive to what's rewarded. If we feel like we're going to be somehow positively reinforced for our learning, we're quite sensitive to that. If we know that you're going to pass that exam or impress that teacher who you really like or whatever it is, all those things are quite motivating. And we can divide that into things that are intrinsic and things that are extrinsic. So you kind of mentioned that earlier, that sort of intrinsic motivation are those kind of very endogenous kind of things. So genuine interest, our own pleasure, our doubt, our curiosity, and then extrinsic things like rewards, perceived negative consequences and deadlines. What do you think is more powerful?
Intrinsic.
You think so?
Yes.
Does everyone agree? Like, what motivates you? What's more powerful for you?
I think it's very subjective.
Yeah.
Some people, do better out of inspiration. Some do better out of desperation.
Yeah. I like that.
Even not just in the person, but the time of life. Like, I mean, like at the moment, I get home, kids, whatever, I have little to no interest in, I have little to no intrinsic motivator to further my development at the moment. But if I know I've got to present on something, or I'm going to have big teaching coming up or whatever, absolutely, I'll knock it down and get it sorted.
Yeah.
But that's varied over time, depending on where I was.
Yeah.
With extrinsic factor, it might not be able to last as long because something else will come along. Whereas
True.
Intrinsic, it's something that's inside you, that's always there.
Yeah, it's more pervasive.
It tends to hold on for a lot longer period of time, able to sustain.
Yeah. I suppose that what you're all kind of getting at is that there's a sense of flux between these two, that it's not necessarily ever just one or ever just the other, and that it will sort of rise and fall depending on where you are in your lives and your careers and whatever else is going on. And that's probably true of our learners too. And so when we're trying to motivate our learners to learn by themselves and to self-direct, we really have to consider this, because some of them will respond very well to the, isn't this interesting? Wouldn't you like to know more about this? And some of them won't. Some will go home and completely switch off, and some of them need to be told, there's a deadline, you're going to present on this topic on this date, and they need that in order to have that sense of direction. And so it's very individual, and it's very dependent on the time of our lives that we're at, and so there's quite a complex overplay.
You can also have a combination of the two.
Yeah.
You can be genuinely interested in something that then is rewarding.
Yeah,
It
true.
is rewarding, financially or otherwise.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And so it's really important to understand this, not only to kind of help ourselves on our own learning, to understand how we can improve our own learning, but also to help self-direct our learners. Does that make sense? Because if you don't understand it, you won't be able to motivate them. What are the obstacles to learning? Nathan, you've touched on some of them already. Kids, other kind of duties, time constraints, boredom, lack of interest.
Access to materials.
Yeah, restricted resources. And why is it important to understand that?
Well, to work out if you can overcome those obstacles, or
Yeah.
maybe you just there isn't a way to overcome time factor, so maybe you just need to refocus or refine what you want to focus on.
Yeah.
Prioritize as well, I guess.
Yeah.
True. So like understanding what our own obstacles are to learning, identifying them and coming up with ways around them, and identifying our learners' obstacles and helping them overcome them. If we're not aware of them, we don't know how to tackle them. So you really have to name what it is that's preventing you from doing it so that you can go on and achieve. So motivating our learners, strategies to motivate. Ask the learner to self-identify. So we've talked about why that's important, that if they pick out things themselves that they're genuinely interested in, that intrinsic motivation is more likely to kick in and they're more likely to go ahead and do it. Ask them how they want to do it. maybe they don't want to read a textbook, maybe they don't want to give a presentation, maybe they have their own way of how they actually want to address that learning or knowledge gap that they have. Reinforce the evidence of self-directed learning. I think a lot of us are taught to be very evidence-based, so if you can prove to someone why it works, they're more likely to do it. And use that controversy and that doubt and that sense of curiosity to your advantage. Like actually there being a bit of a heated debate in the study group can be really useful. And so like expand on that. I remember being in a simulation that really scarred me, where I had an argument with another one of my colleagues about the utility of fast scanning, like ultrasound scanning in pediatric trauma. And she's like, oh, it's very sensitive. You can definitely rule out intra-abdominal injury using a fast scan in kids. And I was like, no, you can't. That's just categorically not proven. And we had this real disagreement about it. And one of the, facilitators kicked in and supported her. And I was like, bullshit, that's not true. And I went off and I read all about it, and I learned so much about fast scan pediatrics, and now I'm an expert on it, because I was really pissed that someone had told me that I was wrong when I wasn't. And so actually using that as a motivational tool can be really powerful. Brainstorm with your learners. Like they might suggest something that maybe is a little off topic, but expand on it. Keep growing with what they've suggested. You probably have your own desired learning outcomes, but you can help them to reach what you want them to reach if you just push them towards it. Keep it moving, keep the conversation going, spread out and branch those learning objectives. Record topics for future consideration. Just because we can't learn about this topic in this month's study group, let's think about it for next month. Nothing's a bad idea. And you have to give them opportunities to actually go off and do it. So there's no point being like, guys, I want you to come up with these 10 different research topics and then be like, but you also have to work every Saturday and Sunday until your deadline. Like you have to give people the time to actually achieve what it is that you're asking them to achieve and facilitate that learning. And just modeling those behaviours yourself is actually really quite motivating. Like if there is doubt or there is controversy, actually being like, oh, why don't we look this up together on the ETG or whatever it might be, and modelling that you actually go off and resolve conflict and use a reliable resource in order to actually learn something where there was a doubt. They'll copy that behaviour. So really modelling.
That was probably the biggest thing I took away from that whole Stanford program. Was a pretty novel idea I hadn't thought about of just that you're trying to paint that picture that you weren't always an expert educator, Rebecca wasn't always awesome at cardiology, that you've gone through a process to get to there, and that is your own self-directed learning as well. So it's not just enough to say you guys should go and read up on this, but just wherever you can incorporating, showing them here's how I do it. And it's not even advertising that's what you're doing, but that idea of just physically just getting on with it and doing it, and then they understand, oh right, Laura doesn't know everything about it, Laura was still learning, and it's really powerful. It was a complete game changer for how I thought about like getting people to self-direct.
I really like that too, like admitting that you're not an expert, that you don't actually necessarily have all the answers and that you have to learn too, is really powerful. And we talked in that Stanford course about creating a curriculum of ignorance, about actually like writing down the things that we don't know and having to go off and explore them together, and that can be really useful. So it's a 4-step process, okay? The first step is assessing the readiness to learn. Are we in the right space, the right frame of mind to actually go about it? To then set some goals so that it's not just nebulous, that there's a actual target to be achieved. To go off and engage in the learning process, and then to evaluate the learning. So assessing readiness to learn is a self-evaluation of your current situation, your family life, your own current study habits, what support network is available to you, and your past experience. You might know that you're ready if you're kind of really self-driven, autonomous, organised, self-disciplined, able to communicate effectively, and able to receive constructive feedback. If you're not in the space of mind to be told that you're going in the wrong direction, there's probably not much point setting out on it. And sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're just too fragile to be told that you're wrong. And so you really have to be in the right headspace to go about this, and able to engage in self-evaluation and self-reflection. Are you actually meeting the goals that you set out to achieve? Set the goals. They have to be defined. There has to be a timeline. You need to decide what resources you're going to use. And really think about how you're going to evaluate and seek feedback. Then actually go off and engage in the process. And there's 3 kind of approaches to studying. The deep approach, it's all about transformation, and it's considered the gold standard or the ideal for self-directed learning. It's about kind of really understanding and conceptualizing the ideas, really applying the knowledge that you have to situations and using novel examples to explain a concept, and going off and learning more than you really need to get through the unit. Whereas a surface approach is much more about like just reproducing. So coping with whatever it is that's required, learning only what you need to like get through in good standing, regurgitate examples, regurgitate explanations that you found in your readings. Whereas a strategic approach is like really organized, get the highest possible grade that you can in the minimum amount of time, learning only what you need to in order to pass, memorizing facts and spending time practicing for exams. I know which one I am. I am very much the strategic approach. I'm like effective. I've got so little time, I have to do really high impact stuff that helps me pass. What do you think you are?
Sometimes you don't have time to do deep approach. Sometimes I do surface approach but I don't have time. Not ideally, because I probably won't remember it last time.
Yeah.
What Nathan brought up, you prioritise. So I think you prioritise what you need to do to survive, and that's probably for me a mixture of the bottom two. But if you find that you really are interested and passionate about something, that you will put the time into the deep approach.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on what situation you're in and what you are renewing, I guess.
It is a sort of continuum as well, because I was just trying to think of specific examples for myself. Like, I know when new concepts are coming, I sort of hit them with a surface approach to kind of work out, is this something worth pursuing, is this something that, but then as you sort of engage in that, like a strategic approach to that, it often will move into a deeper understanding of it, and it's not just recitation anymore, like you actually understand the process, but it takes a lot longer, and it might not be, I don't know, for me it's not always a considered process to go for the deep approach, but often just by starting that and doing that for a period of time does move into a deep approach. Like the initial plan was learn a few of the facts to recite what the current stats are for CPR before we do it, but then you go into the,
So it can be a continuum. Yeah. It makes sense that the top one is kind of the best state for that self-directed learning approach, right? And so trying to get our learners there and understanding how they might be in the bottom two and trying to move them up to the top one, I think is important.
Could you say that the bottom ones are like steps towards that one?
Yeah, right?
I mean, I think we all aim for deep approach, but whether you get there or not. So I mean, we all want to do that assignment, you know, finish a week before it's due, but how many of us finish at the morning it's due?
Yeah.
I think it also depends what you're going to do with that learning process too, because as you've said, I think the others have said, it's about the interest you have in the topic. And if it's an area that you're going to use again and again, or you can see that there's some benefit in finding out all of the nitty-gritty about a topic, then you'll take more of a deep approach for those sort of questions versus others.
Absolutely. And so hopefully if we have done step 2 and step 1 really well, then it's much easier to get to that deep approach, right? Because if you've already self-selected a topic that you're passionate about and really set those goals and allocated the time for it and assess your readiness to go off and do it, it should be much easier then to take that approach. So it's nothing in isolation. We're not just going to dive in and try to learn. If we can really decide what is the best use of our time, then it's much easier to adopt that deep approach. And then evaluation. How do you know that you've actually learned? Are you flexible in adapting and applying that knowledge? Are you confident in explaining material? It's very different to like know something for yourself and be able to explain it to someone else. It really requires a deeper understanding and to be able to answer questions about it. When do you know that you've learned enough about a particular topic? When is it time for self-reflection, and when do you have to ask someone else to reflect for you? So things to think about when you're defining those goals and really trying to work out what it is that you're trying to learn. You need to work out how you're going to evaluate when it's time to stop. So what resources can we use? Who reads anymore?
What's on the internet?
Oh, great. I don't even know where the library is in Westmeath. Like, I don't remember the last time. And like when I was studying for my fellowship exams in emergency medicine, I used like online textbooks. I downloaded the PDF versions and I'd like use them for reference only and I'd skim past them. But I suppose there's a wealth of information available there, and if it's been put down in print, it's probably a reliable source of information. Consultation with superiors, with colleagues. Computer resources is probably where most of us go, right? I intrinsically go to that. So libraries, journals, textbooks, I'd encourage, like where relevant, to use them, because they're probably evidence-based, peer-reviewed, you know, they're reliable sources of information. Consultation, your colleagues I think are really useful, particularly just for bouncing ideas around from. Can you think of who your best teacher was? And why? Why were they a good educator? I definitely have someone who comes to mind when I think of who my favourite educator was, and I've tried to like pinpoint what it was that made her, you know, really easy to learn from. Because if you can pinpoint those behaviours, then you can model them. And mentors. I think if you're going to go off and self-direct your learning, it's really useful to have someone who you consider a mentor, who can tell you whether or not you're on the right track. But I also want to think of you guys thinking of yourselves as being mentors for other people, and how can you mentor someone through this process? Please. The bane of every emergency physician's life. Please. You have to be so careful with what you look up online. Not only for our patients, but like for ourselves. There's so much rubbish, and you just have to be so careful. And so if you do have a topic that you're trying to look up, blindly Googling it can really lead you down the wrong avenue. Like every headache is a brain tumour, and you know.
I don't know, I think I call it a quick and dirty search, like just a Google search to see what comes up, and then I sometimes use that to pinpoint what other resources I should refer to.
Yeah, and I think we all do that.
Yeah.
But how do you pick out what's reliable from what's not?
Yeah. We need to know what your reliable resources are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't go to some random blog to find out what your headache is for. You know.
And so what do you consider to be a reliable resource? Like what's your go-to?
So evidence-based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you something in particular that's like your fallback?
I like the Cochrane database.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really easy to use.
Yeah.
And I don't know, easy to understand, particularly with their summaries on the front page.
Yeah. Love a summary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that's a really like respected, you know, entirely evidence-based approach. So I mean, beautiful. That's always going to be easy.
Yeah.
But it's good for me. You get a lot of. I remember wasn't as exposed when I was at uni. Because they said use Google Scholar if you use anything, but a lot of things you Google now, you'll get Mayo Clinic or you'll get Livestrong, like the Armstrong Foundation, which I think is linked to Nike. And that, as I said, that people think it's interesting because a lot of the information you get out there is supposedly good, but he had issues with cheating, Nike and things. So
exactly.
But still, I find a lot of Mayo Clinic that come up and clinics and medical, because it's said whether you screen it for.
Professional organisations can be a good guide.
Yeah.
Things like the HON code, although you need to probably look at the currency of the code of that HON code, and even then it can be quite variable with what gets a HON code. Of course, we've always got CAP.
Yeah.
And CAP resources had actually already been screened to ensure that there isn't things like advertisements and things that might not necessarily be evidence-based.
Yeah.
So we've got many resources there, whether it be up to date or best practice, as some of the examples that we might have used there.
And I think that we forget that that's available, and we forget that that's available from home. Like we work hard for this organisation, and one of the few benefits that we get is a membership to CAP. And you can email people so that you can have access to that at home. And I'd encourage you to use that as a resource because, like you said, it's by definition screened and evidence-based. I think, with experience that we've all had, some training and how to identify what's good quality information and what's not. And when you have that degree of experience, you can read something that's quite obviously bullshit and go, no thank you, and click back to your Google search. But some of our less experienced users might not have that. And so I think it's good for us to know what's available and to really encourage them early to use very validated resources to avoid that garbage in, garbage out kind of phenomenon.
It's interesting, I just bring up a point there. When you talk, there's some issues, the ones that I think mainly that are so conflicted: diets, climate change, like all these things of like you said, the majority of people say this is the science or whatever, and then you get opposing.
Yeah, and everyone's an expert.
You get so much political involved now to say that's bullshit, no, that's bullshit, and then these people present facts and so on. So it can be, depending on the areas you're looking at, really contentious.
Yeah.
Because like I said, you get two dietitians that are trying to agree on, oh, I'm on a carnivore diet, no, I'm on keto, no, I'm on, and they will just shoot each other down. And
that's right.
Or
equally like vaccination. If you Google experts who are against vaccination, you'll find a list of 200 YouTube videos. If you do the same search for doctors who are against vaccination on PubMed, you won't find anything. Do you know what I mean? And so the device that you use to perform the search can really influence the results that you get. And if we don't already have enough knowledge to be able to filter out what's useful and what's not useful, that can be dangerous because it's an expert and it's from an accredited, you know what I mean? So I completely agree with you. You can get expert opinions to prove or disprove anything. And so we have to be really careful. So this is what I recommend. So CEP is my first one. The ETG is amazing. I don't think we use it enough. Do you use the ETG like on the computers, the electronic guidelines, therapeutic guidelines?
Oh, yeah. It's in CEP.
Yeah. It is amazing. Like, you basically don't need to go to medical school. You just look up anything on ETG and it tells you how to do it. It's like how to be a doctor 101. It's amazing. I think we should use it more. PubMed is obviously very reliable. Up to date is awesome. Up to date is, like, by definition, updated really frequently, and it's written by world-renowned experts. And like any topic under the sun, there is no talk that you could not prepare for using Up to Date. Life in the Fast Lane is one that I really like. It's a little bit emergency medicine skewed or quick care skewed, but it's still really useful and has some lovely information that's presented in a very kind of manageable, bite-sized sort of a way. If you're looking for podcasts, you have to buy these. Are you laughing because you like it or because you hate it?
I'm a huge podcaster. You ask these guys.
Podcast is podcaster.
I love.
I don't watch TV, listen to radio. I podcast.
There you go.
How much is MRAP?
MRAP I think is like $75 a year. I used to listen to it in the car as I was driving to and from work. I've already been complaining to Jennifer about my commute. And like in the run up to my exams, I would have that on in the car, and I swear to God, 2 questions on my fellowship emergency medicine exam, I wouldn't have had a notion if I hadn't listened to MRAP, so it was worth my $75. Crit is similar, much more of a critical care skew, and Emergency Pedia, which is run by our very own Andrew Coggins, who I'm sure you know. Again, just a wealth of information, so many resources. So things that you can really stand behind, particularly when you know people who are involved in this stuff, right? Like we know the people who do MRAP, we know the people who do MCRIT, we know the people who do Life in the Fast Lane, we know that they're legitimate people giving good quality information. And foam. Foam search is like an actual like search bar, similar to Google, that searches through all the free open access and medical education material, and is a really useful thing to search on instead of doing the Google search, because it'll only show you things that are screened and legitimate. So, has everyone got something to write on or paper? Because I have brought paper if people need it.
I need it.
You are. You've got one loaded on, somebody prepared. This used to be one of my fellowship notebooks, and I'm like, burn it. Tear out the pages.
Never need to learn again.
Never need to learn again. Particularly not self-directed. Use my strategic approach.
So that Clinical P now is just more of another online resource of
Search
where
engine.
everything is, yeah.
Yeah. There you go, Patrick, you can play too.
Okay.
So my quiz had purpose. Whoever gets the most right answers wins a prize. Who is the actress with the most Oscar nominations? How many nominations has she had and how many has she won? That's question 1. I think there are 20. Who is the male actor with the most Oscar nominations? How many nominations has he had and how many has he won? Who is the actress who has won the most Oscars? Won the most Oscars. How many has she won and how many nominations did she have?
Sorry, can you say the first question again?
The first question is who's the actress with the most Oscar nominations?
Oh.
How many nominations has she had and how many has she won? Who is the male actor who has won the most Oscars and had the most nominations? How many has he won and how many nominations has he had? What movie has won the most Oscars? You can take any one of the ones that Jennifer gave you. You get a bonus point if you remember how many it won and how many it was nominated for. What movie has... Oh no, we did that. What was the most Oscar-nominated movie of 2018 and for how many Oscars was it nominated? And how many did it win? What is the name of the tallest building in the world? Where is it and how tall is it? How tall is the world's tallest man, according to the Guinness Book of Records, and what is his name? What is the name of the phobia described as being a fear of being tickled by feathers? On what day of the week is a person statistically most likely to have a heart attack, and how much more likely is it to happen on that day? What is the only country in the world to be named after a woman? What is Bob Dylan's real name? What is the name of the phobia defined as the fear of Friday the 13th? Extra points if you spell it right. What is the name of the world's biggest island? What sentence uses every letter in the English language? What was Marilyn Monroe's real name? What was Sherlock Holmes' address? How many squares are there on a chessboard? What is the Hungarian word for pepper? And how many of Snow White's 7 dwarfs have names ending in Y, and name them? Can everyone please swap answer papers?
Here's my answer, you shall not lose.
You can give each other a mark out of 20. I'll pull out the answers, and you can choose how generous or stingy you are with what constitutes the right answer. So who's the actress with the most Oscar nominations? How many nominations and how many has she won? Meryl Streep, 21 nominations and 3 wins. Question 2 is Jack Nicholson, 12 nominations and 3 wins. The actress who's won the most Oscars, I have Katharine Hepburn, 4 Oscars and 12 nominations. The actor who has won the most Oscars and had the most nominations is Jack Nicholson with 3 wins and 12 nominations. The movie, I have Titanic, 11 wins and 14 nominations. But we'll also accept Ben-Hur. What was the other one, Jenna? Lord of the Rings. There you go.
Titanic had 17 nominations.
So you have to track your resources. For 2018, it was The Shape of Water, 13 nominations and 4 wins. The tallest building in the world is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai in the UAE. 828 meters or 830 meters. The world's tallest man is 8 foot 2 inches. Nathan, you'll have to remind me the name because you've got someone different to me. Robert Wadler.
If you just wrote 8 foot something, that pass.
Robert something.
Wadler, yeah, I'd give you that. The phobia of being tickled by feathers, pteronophobia. You're more likely to have a heart attack on Monday by 20%. St. Lucia is the only country to be named after a woman. Bob Dylan is Robert Zimmerman. The fear of Friday the 13th. Parascabidecatriophobia.
Smashed it.
Yeah. I haven't been practicing. The world's biggest island is Greenland. Every letter in the English language. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Or the saucier alternative.
Give me some booze.
Yeah. Something about putting booze in boxes.
The other one was pack my box with 5 dozen liquor jugs.
There you go.
That'd be interesting.
Marilyn Monroe was Norma Jean Baker. Sherlock Holmes at 221B Baker Street in London. Squares on a chessboard, depends on how pedantic you are, 64 or 214, is that right?
204.
204.
Yeah, 204.
The Hungarian word for pepper, I had paprika, but we had an alternative answer.
A bore is B-O-R-S.
Boars. And Snow White, sneezy, dopey, happy, sleepy, grumpy.
5.
Sneezy, dopey, sleepy.
So give yourselves a score out of 20.
Wasn't there also sleepy?
Yeah, sleepy, sleepy, sneezy, dopey, happy, sleepy, grumpy. Ooh. Did anyone get 20? Everyone scored?
No, I don't think. You just how do you count when you put 3 parts to a question?
You can decide yourselves. Be lenient or generous. Can I have scores from the back?
15.
15,
12.
12,
6.
6,
16.
16,
14 and a half.
14 and a
12
half,
and a half.
12 and a half.
Oh, I failed.
Jennifer?
That's right.
So 16 takes it.
Yeah.
Congratulations.